Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. There was a little sprinkle of rain. I was so excited driving down. My car is in the shop, and I'm driving my husband's car, which I refer to as the tank. It's a Volvo. I have no understanding of how anything in it works, basically. So I thought if it's really raining, I don't know how to turn on the windshield wipers. Well, I do, but here we are. Anyway, virtual audience, thank you very much for joining us. And I'm so pleased that my friend Matthew Goldman has come to see us again, except I guess I should call you Matt because Matthew is too formal.
I never go by Matthew.
I know you don't. Still, Matt has some interesting news about Nils Shapiro, which is the character that I met for sure that you might have in Gone to Dust, right?
Yes.
One of my favorite books. I just think it's genius the way it starts. So how many Nils Shapiro are there?
There are 4 Nils books, and Nils is in a few chapters of The Murder Show.
Mm-hmm.
He comes back in a minor role, but it does set up his return.
Excellent.
So Nils will be back in his own book called Dark Humor in December. Yeah.
I'm so excited. I know. I love a series. We're going to talk about the difference between series and standalone series as we go along. But I think he wrote, 3 in a row, didn't you? And then you branched out?
4.
Was
There
it
were
4 in a row?
4 Nils books. And
Okay.
then my publisher asked me to write standalones, the first of which was a book called Carolina Moonset.
Terrific.
Which is my best-selling book to date. There it is. And so then my publisher did not want me to go back to Nils. So because the standalone did so well.
Was so successful?
Yeah. Although Nils does have a dedicated legion of fans.
Well, he certainly does in me.
Yeah.
But after Carolina Moonset, what did you write?
I wrote a book called A Good Family, which was
That
kind
is so sneaky.
yeah.
Did you all read A Good Family? Oh, my God. I mean, it was absolutely, you really floored me with that one.
And then last year, Still Waters came out.
Right here.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
And now this is my 4th standalone, The Murder Show. And I will continue to write standalones and Nils.
So
and and a few other things.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have quite a few books lined up to come out in the
I
next
do.
couple of years, don't you?
I do.
That's so exciting. I just
Yeah.
love it, hearing this industrious author here that we have.
Well, it really helps if you're not good at anything else. And you don't have another job, which because of all my TV writing, I'm fortunate to not have to work another job. So, but yeah, I treat it like a job.
Does that mean you're still getting royalties from TV?
I do get some,
Yeah.
but I get health care I'm vested in the Writers Guild health care,
Wonderful.
and I will have a pension. So that takes a lot of pressure off.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
Right. And you've written, most of them have a Minnesota background. Carolina Moonset doesn't. And obviously there was one Nils in Hollywood, if I remember.
Yeah, it started in Minnesota and ended in Minnesota, but Nils was sent to Los Angeles to investigate something.
So in The Murder Show, we are going to go from Hollywood back to Minnesota. But the message of The Murder Show, as far as I can work out, and I don't see anybody really junior here, is that you never really get out of high school. I mean, no matter how your life goes,
Right.
We can't escape high school.
Yeah. The Murder Show is about a television writer named Ethan Harris who has a show called The Murder Show. And it's been on for 3 years. And it keeps getting worse ratings every year. So the network has said to him, we don't know about a 4th season. He goes in and this is backstory. He pitches them something. They're like, we don't like this. Come back with something better or we're canceling your show. So he goes back to the drawing board and the Writers Guild strike happens, which we just went through within the last year or so. Yeah. And I, as a member of the Writers Guild, I've been through 3 of them. They're very stressful. But Nils sees this as an opportunity. He has more time now. And he's 40 years old, which to most of us doesn't sound old. But in Hollywood, 40 is old. And he's really worried that if his show does not continue on the air, he's too old to be hired onto someone else's show. So, which is kind of true, sadly. Not completely, but if a 30-year-old hotshot writer creates a show, they don't want some 40-year-old hanging around telling them how that person did it back in the day. So he's got a lot of stress about this. And so he goes back to Minnesota where he's from, because that's where he does his best thinking. He has some time. And while he's back there, he runs into his old neighbor, Rosalie Greenman. They were best friends in high school. Romance never happened for them for various reasons. But Ro is now a Minneapolis police officer. And when Ethan runs into her, they talk about the summer after high school. They had a mutual friend named Ricky who was killed in a hit and run. No one ever stepped forward and claimed responsibility. The police never found out who did it. They don't know if it was on purpose or a freak accident, and nobody claimed responsibility. And Roe, through investigating some similar things that have happened to teenagers, thinks it might be linked to some other criminal operation. But these hit and runs have happened scattered out in like a 5-state area. Nobody wants to go back and investigate them. Ricky was killed in rural Wisconsin on the way to a cabin. And so she has no jurisdiction, and she convinces Ethan to help investigate with her under the guise that maybe if you put this on the air, some things we know about Ricky, the rest you'll have to make up. Maybe someone will step forward and we'll find out what really happened to him. And because you could use this idea as a foundation for your 4th season of the murder show. He doesn't really believe her. He's a little more interested in her personally. They're both still single 22 years after graduating. So he kind of plays along, but once they start uncovering a few things, it gets a little dark and twisted, and there's definitely something to investigate there. So the book is they reconnect with other high school friends. So I've really kind of based this on Ethan's angst about staying relevant in television, which I always had. I always felt like I was either working way too much, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, or I was desperate to find my next job. There were very few not stressful times for me in my 30-year television writing career. And Ro has guilt over it because she and Ethan were on that trip where Ricky was killed, and she thought somehow she could have maybe prevented it. And it's also about reconnecting with old high school friends after decades. And I think we all have a memory of that time that we think was the truth. And sometimes you find out it wasn't the truth and that you remember it wrong, or there was just things you didn't know. And it's about that as well.
Sure. But there are dynamics that prevailed in high school, whether you were one of the cool kids or one of the nerds, or
Yeah.
whether and sometimes it takes you your whole life to get over that.
Yeah.
And sometimes the ones that were cool crash and burn, and it takes them a whole time to get over it. But, Ethan's not entirely pure here because he's pretty desperate for an idea for his 4th season.
He is.
So, he's not entirely altruistic when he agrees to help Ro, because it might be that he has stumbled upon a really killer concept for his TV show.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to have an amateur sleuth, you really do need to have a pressing reason, for them to step into something. I mean, it's not always without danger. Even if it seems like, it's going to be harmless, that if you start turning over rocks, sometimes, dragons come out.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very difficult to write amateur sleuths. I mean, at least this time he's paired with an actual police officer. But amateur sleuths, it's hard because how do they know what to do? Ethan's only done it fictionally. And I know as a television writer, writers who write crime dramas do a lot of research. They do ride-alongs with actual police officers. They meet with FBI agents, just like fiction writers do. We do all of those things as well. But still, they're amateurs. So
And it's not just writers that are unhappy when a series is coming to an end. Actors are as
Oh
well. I
yeah,
know Michael Connelly told me that the guy that plays Bosch, it's 10 years.
Titus Welliver.
He's really doesn't want to let go.
Yeah,
I mean, Titus Welliver has been his life. He probably feels more like Titus Welliver. I
yeah,
mean, sorry, more like Harry Bosch than he does like
yeah,
Titus Welliver at
yeah.
this point. And there are other people in the show as well. So, I mean, it's rare that a TV show goes that long. I mean, 10
I
years
know that's really
is
something.
amazing. Um, but, you know, I could see that it would be, there's a family feeling to it.
Mm-hmm.
I know Ann Cleves told me when they wrapped up Vera, the last season, they had a cast party and everybody was in tears. I think that, trying to remember the name of the woman who plays Vera. One of you can tell me. Patrick? Thank you, Brenda. Right, Brenda Blethyn. I knew it would come back, so everybody's used to my
Yeah.
skip. Anyway, I think she was wise to call it off,
It most
because
often
she,
is the wise thing to do.
yeah, I mean, she'd reached the point, I think it was 12 seasons or something, maybe
Mhm.
more, where she not only was tired, but she was really aging out of it,
Yeah.
and you could tell. But still, it was tremendous. And then Anne, remember, any of you watched Shetland? Jimmy, okay.
Mhm.
So you know what Anne's done? She's moved him to the Hebrides. So her new book that'll be out in the fall has got Jimmy. Remember, who decided he didn't want to be a cop anymore, and that was his exit. Of course, she didn't write that. That was the script writers for Shetland, because she didn't write
Right.
the books that led to the last seasons. But I thought, how interesting, he's going to pop up again on another Scottish island, which probably means we're now going to get a different series from Shetland called Hebrides or
Yeah.
whatever. So,
Like the Yellowstone series. They'll
yeah.
just keep bouncing around.
right.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think anytime there's a show that, well, what was Seinfeld like? I mean, to leave that to,
Yeah, and I was
that
there.
was a whole family
I
thing.
was in my 20s when I wrote on that
Were
show.
you really?
Yeah. And after a couple of years, I asked to leave just because Larry and Jerry, and rightfully so, did most of the work. And I was able to contribute. I wrote scripts and I got some things in other people's scripts, but I wanted to be more hands-on. So, but that is a family. Those shows are families. You spend a lot of time with those people, like any job, really. But it's a little more intense in television, I think. So, and you're, I always say, like, working on a television show as a writer is like going out to sea in a submarine. Like, you're locked down with these people, and you better find a way to get along because you have to get the work done. Some really intense, nice relationships form, and it is sad to say goodbye.
So Ethan, though, by leaving and going back to Minnesota, he's kind of distanced himself from the Hollywood circle.
Yeah, and it's the strike, and those strikes are, you're supposed to picket so much, and Ethan did his share of picketing, but when they drag on, they're painful, and you
So
need
the
to get
strike,
away.
you couldn't write for scripts or anything, but did it prevent you from writing books?
No, and you can write scripts on spec on your
Right.
own. No one's paying you, but yeah, you can write books.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So do you think that sometimes strikes turn, script writers to books just because
Well,
it's still writing?
strikes and downturns in the business. I can't tell you how many TV writer friends have contacted me and say, "So how do you get into that book business?" I'm like, "Well, you kind of got to write a book.
So
You can't just, you got to do it, especially in fiction. You can't pitch a concept unless you're very well known. You have to actually write the book.
and you really can't sell a full book. I mean, a first book, unless you've written the entire
Correct.
book. You can, if you're a successful author, you can sell subsequent books with a little synopsis, or sometimes it's novels.
First
that
novels,
you have to
you have
go
to
all the
write it.
way through. The publisher has to believe that you're gonna
And
go
you,
the
and
distance.
You can't write a novel in a week like you can with a television show. If you're under the gun, you can write it pretty fast.
So what interested you in writing a book?
Books have always been my favorite medium. I'm not saying they're better, but I just love that intimate relationship, and the writing process. I'm quite introverted. I always say I'm an introvert with social skills, but being around in a room full of writers for 60, 70, 80 hours a week, as smart and funny and wonderful as all those people were, it was exhausting for me, just exhausting. So working alone, I'm just feel so much more energized and motivated, and and I had for one of the rare peaceful moments I had as a television writer is I had 4 months after leaving one show and knowing that I was going to have a job in 4 months. And I'd been reading a lot of crime fiction because I thought I wanted to move into television drama. And I thought, oh, I'll be on a cop show or something, so I'm going to start reading a lot of crime fiction. And I just fell in love with the genre. And so I had that 4-month window, and I just kind of sat down and started writing, and that was it. It changed my life.
Yeah, but you actually knew how to write. I mean, not every first novelist knows how to write.
Well, yeah, but I do credit television with a lot of that because
Yeah.
I'd worked on over 500 episodes of television, so I knew character, I knew relationships, I knew series architecture, I knew story, and most of that transferred over, really everything except prose. And the only thing I'm trying to unlearn from television is, which this is my 8th book, and more are coming. And I'm just starting to figure out I don't have to try to be super entertaining all the time. So I think in a book, it's okay to back off of that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is my 8th novel. Quite a few more are coming in the near future. And I feel like I've just scratched the surface of novel writing. Still have a long way to go. Yeah.
I think it's wonderful. I mean, and to be successful, you have to keep learning, don't
Yeah,
you
you
think?
do. And it's great to have new things and new discovery. Like, I use that as an excuse to explain my immaturity, but it's really finding new pathways, new projects is quite invigorating.
One of the charms of your books, though, is the humor, and the other is the visuals. I mean, who can forget the actual opening scene in Gone to Dust? I
Yeah.
mean, where are you going to find that? Have all of you read Gone to Dust? You haven't
Yeah,
read
for
it
people
yet.
who haven't read it,
Ah,
uh,
it's a real treat.
in the beginning, this all happens in chapter 1, so I'm not really giving anything away. A woman is found murdered in her home, and her body, and indeed most of the house, is covered in the dust and dirt from hundreds of vacuum cleaner bags. And the reason the murderer did that is because there's so much forensic evidence in that dust and dirt, hair and fiber and DNA, that it's almost impossible to isolate one killer. So it's impossible to solve the crime in the lab, which I did, and I set it in Edina, Minnesota, which is a real place, which at the time hadn't had a murder in decades. So they had a very inexperienced police department, and so they hired a consultant, which is my private detective Nils. And by not having a crime that could be solved in the lab, Nils had to draw on his personal life experience to gain insight into the investigation. And the reason I did that is so we could get to know Nils in like an organic way. Because I really do believe, as interesting and page-turning as the crimes can be, it's the characters who really resonate and stick with a reader.
Oh, that's absolutely
Yeah.
true. But it is a great visual,
Yeah.
as a reader to sit there and imagine, this, cloud of
Yeah. I think
dirt
Nils,
and dust and all the rest of it shrouding everything.
when the Edina police first showed him the crime scene, his first comment was something like, "Did someone murder the maid? Like, what happened? This place hasn't been cleaned in forever."
Right. But I mean,
Yeah.
you are really good at visuals. I
Oh,
think
thanks.
your the book about the family has some terrific
Oh,
visuals.
a good family. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So
Yeah.
I think that having spent all that time in television, do you kind of see things as you're writing?
Yeah, and I always have. I do. I explain my writing process as I daydream and write down what I see, and then I use my writing skills to fix it later, so it all makes sense. But yeah, it's a very visual process for me, which I understand from talking to other novelists. It's not that way for everyone. Some people, I was talking to Sean Cosby about it. they can't picture things in detail clearly. Some people, so uh, it's I don't know why I think that way, but it does, I think, serve me as a writer.
Well, I have had writers say to me that were script writers and now writing books that the hard part is filling in all this stuff. A script is mostly just dialogue, and you don't have to describe things, right? Because the camera's going to do that. You don't
Yeah.
have to dress people because the costume is going to do
Yes.
that. You don't even have to describe your characters because the actors are going to do that. And so to write a book, none of those other people are
Exactly.
available to
All
help you.
all those people add so much. I always explain it as when you write a script, it's the blueprint for a house. There's no interior decorator
Right.
yet. There's no one's picked the siding. There's so much that still has to be done on top of the blueprint. But when you write a book, you're making the whole house.
Yeah, but I mean, conversely, it's also hard for novelists to write scripts, many of them, because they can't really shed all the other stuff.
That's true.
That's why Raymond Chandler did not write, The Big Sleep. But of course, his plot was so. You all know that
He,
story about. I'm trying to remember who it was. Some really
Billy Wilder.
was it? Yeah, but there was somebody writing the script, a well-known
Oh
writer.
yes, yes.
And anyway, if you read The Big Sleep, it isn't entirely coherent. And so the guy writing the script for The Big Sleep called Raymond Chandler. Ray said, I don't understand why whatever this
What
is.
happened to the chauffeur?
Yeah, what happened to the chauffeur? And Ray said, damned if I know.
Yeah.
I mean, he was like,
Yeah, There's
yeah.
another great quote. Billy Wilder, the director, did hire Raymond Chandler to write the script for, I think, Double Indemnity. I might be wrong about that, but I think it was Double Indemnity. And Chandler spent 6 months writing that script, and Wilder basically threw it out and had it rewritten. And Chandler was furious, just furious. And Billy Wilder said to him, like, you got paid. You got paid fairly to do the work you did, so I don't know what you're complaining about. And Raymond Chandler said, do not underestimate the value of 6 months of a man's life. That was his response. And it does feel that way when you write, and it's one reason I never wanted to work much in film. The writer is the low person on the totem pole. And you do put your heart and soul into those things, and you do get paid, so that's fair. But to have them just bring in some other writer or change everything is quite disheartening.
So, to be really fair, if any of you seen the movie The Big Sleep? If you haven't, I recommend that you watch it because there's marvelous stuff in it, but it doesn't make sense there's a whole chunk of it that doesn't make sense towards the end. So, some years ago, they released the director's cut. And when you watched it, you recognize that the reason that the movie doesn't make sense at all is they took this chunk out of it. And the reason is that Lauren Bacall was new, and her agent pressured the people making the movie because you only have so many minutes to make a movie, that the movie
Yeah.
can run. She needed more screen time, so they sacrificed the critical scene
The
in
story,
the police
yeah.
department or whatever it is, where the plot goes in order to give Lauren Bacall more chance to be on screen. So if you watch the movie, find the director's cut. Don't watch the original movie. You can do it. I thought it was revelatory, but
Yeah.
right. I mean, I love the book, but I probably read it when I was like 19 or
Yeah.
something. So it's been a long while back.
Yeah, Chandler was a big influence on me because I came to him late. And when I read him and his detective, Philip Marlowe, who narrates the books, Philip Marlowe is very funny. He has a wry observation about social things happening in the world. And I'm not comparing myself to Chandler at all, but I thought, and he tells a serious story, but I thought, oh, I have this comedic voice I've been developing over 30 years as a writer.
Right.
I can use my voice to give it to Nils and have him tell a darker story. And that's really how I found my way into writing crime fiction.
That's marvelous. Now, one thing that Matt does that I thought was really generous on page 208 of The Murder Show, here's a scene. The bar is even more crowded than it was at dinner. Ethan finds one empty stool between a couple of 20 somethings on a date and a group of four women in their 60s. The women each have a stack of books in front of them, and from what Ethan can tell, they're trading them like playing cards. I'll give you two Lee Childs for one Lisa Scottolini, and you can borrow my William Kent Kruger. But damn it, Donna, if it comes back with a coffee ring on the cover, I am never speaking to you again. I love that. I mean, I thought it was so great that you
Thanks.
brought, some other right. But I can see these women, shuffling books around in the bar, it's like poker or something.
I don't know what I expected when I became a novelist, especially of crime fiction. But one thing that blew me away was the community of crime fiction writers and booksellers and readers and libraries. It's so tight and supportive. Like, I have a ton of television writer friends, but we don't get together and have a convention once or twice a year and are thrilled to see each other. The crime writing community is
Interactive.
yeah, and it's so supportive. The top selling authors are nothing but supportive of those people coming up.
Well, it's not. It's not really competitive.
No, it does. It's not competitive. It's
very different.
The feeling is if one book does well, it's good for all of us, which is 100% true. And I don't know if that's true in other genres, but it's a really wonderful community.
I understand it. The romance writers is an absolute cesspool.
That's what I've heard.
They split it apart. It was practically
I have heard there are a bunch of backstabbers. I didn't want to say it, but now that you've brought it up.
Oh, it's legendary how the whole thing, fell
there's
apart.
a lot of mean stuff going on in
real
romance.
snake pit there. So, okay.
You took my shirtless man for your cover. I don't know what they're fighting about, but
right. Well, maybe people who are preoccupied with murder recognize that it isn't safe to take off after everybody. So, could be the deal.
Yeah.
So here's another thing that speaks back to what we've been talking about. So Ethan only met Assistant Chief Cassetta once, but the man is an imposing figure with his height and fit body and tailored dress blues. Now Ethan can't get his mind off the man. When Ethan's asked to speak to aspiring writers, one question comes up every time. How do you discipline yourself to write? To which Ethan answers, it's not discipline, it's a disease. And he's feeling the effects of that disease now as his subconscious won't stop trying different endings for both the fourth season of The Murder Show and the actual murders of Ricky O'Shea, Austin Crosby, and Trooper Wallen he's currently working on. And I thought, that's so true, that he really is there for the plot.
Yeah, that's another part of this book. Like, when you're in high school, you think about what's like right in front of your face, and it's mostly social interaction, dating people, how you think you're perceived by your peers. But when you're an adult, you have a career and an allegiance to that career. So, there's this weird undercurrent as Ro and Ethan investigate. He's thinking about how he can use this for his show, and she's trying to solve a crime. She's a professional crime solver. And so you never really know, if they're being on the up and up with each other.
Right. Yeah. No, he's actually hoping for more twists in the plot, right?
They have ulterior motives.
A really good thing. It's so true. I mean, my own experience, when you're young, when you're a teenager, you think every eye is upon you. Everything you do is scrutinized. Right. I remember being too embarrassed to tee off on the ninth green at at the golf course when I was a kid because I was sure everybody was going to watch and laugh at my form. And, when you get to be an adult, you recognize that people really aren't preoccupied with you. And,
no, we're all preoccupied with ourselves.
Well, but I mean, it's the time in your life when you're a teenager that you're the most vulnerable to public opinion and the world around you because you're moving away from your parents. You're trying to find independence. You don't really know who you are.
Right.
And that's why I say I think sometimes we never really escape the high school.
We're very dentable at that age, and those dents don't come out easily. Right. So, and especially when Ricky is killed that summer after high school, that's when people have 1 foot in childhood and 1 foot in adulthood, and it's all new and kind of exciting and scary, and there's a lot of vulnerability there.
And there are also an incredible number of dumb things
Oh
that
yeah,
kids, especially boys in high school,
we're the
do.
worst. Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're just are because you don't really you think you're immortal and you
Yes, you
don't
do.
really understand risk. You know, Audie Murphy, who was the most
Hmm.
decorated soldier in World War II, he was like 17 or something. You know,
Yeah.
he was so young, he really didn't think that anybody could kill him.
And that's why the death of Ricky is extra shocking to them
Yeah.
because they're at that age when they think they're immortal.
So it takes a cold case very often to get something going in the
Hmm.
present. So, it wouldn't really work the same if when he got there, a grown up Ricky was killed.
Right. No, it wouldn't have been the same.
So you need that,
Yeah.
you know. And also this crowdsourcing thing, for those of you who read John Sanford's another Minnesota book, Lethal Prey, which is absolutely brilliant, um, the two detectives, Lucas Davenport and Virgil Flowers, um, are confounded by the fact that the sister of the woman killed 20 years ago in the cold case is dying, and so she decides that the one thing she wants to do before she dies, and she has a lot of money, is to post a reward for like $5 million if
Hmm.
anybody can develop leads to what happened to her sister. So when Lucas and Virgil get to the site of some new thing that's happened, there are podcasters and all those people everywhere because they're all there to try to collect the reward, but they're also there to do things that will get them clicks and therefore more followers.
Yeah.
But it still is a whole sort of crowdsourcing approach to solving a crime
Right.
where there really are absolutely no leads at all. And so two guys, no matter how good they are
Right.
probably not going to be able to accomplish that. But when you've got like a couple of hundred people, with all kinds of media outlets and
Hmm.
all the rest of it, then they may score some information more easily.
Yeah. And the true crime podcasts and shows have really
They really have.
inspired people to
So
try to.
her idea
Yeah.
that if Ethan,
Yeah.
is able to write this, turn Ricky's death into a episode of the murder show, and maybe then scare loose some information,
Yeah.
is not unfounded.
No, it's not unfounded. Yeah.
And you're right. Podcasters have become the private eyes of crime fiction at this point.
Yeah.
It's really interesting how many books now are built around true crime shows
Yeah.
and podcasting shows. So that part is fascinating too.
Mhm.
Anything else you want to say about the murder show? We can't really tell you what happened. You might as
No,
well
I
just
can't
go
tell
home
you
right
what
now.
happened. I can tell you this: if the new Nils book that's coming in December, you don't have to read this to read that book. But if you read that book first, it'll wreck this book for you. Yeah. So
No
because
pressure there.
because
Right.
it's almost like a sequel to this book.
Right. Now, this book did come out as a simultaneous paperback and hardcover.
Yeah.
You're not going to have to wait for the paperback if you decide you'd rather own the paperback as well, or get the paperback. So that's fair. But that's a good warning. Thank you. I will
Yeah.
remind people when we get
Yeah.
to December, because Matt's offered to come back and talk to us about Nils. So,
I will leave Minnesota in the winter anytime.
what a sacrifice!
Yeah.
What a guy! Yeah, gotta love it.
Yeah. I'm gonna
Right.
bring my golf clubs. It's going to be great.
Well, you're going to have to come by January 14th because I'm leaving.
I will.
I'm leaving for 6 weeks to go on a long trip from
I will-
Auckland to
I will-
Singapore.
I will come right early in December, so it's available for the
Okay,
holidays.
that'll be great.
Yeah.
Perfect. I like that. So, questions from any of you? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Gone to Dust.
Gone
it's
to
g-
Dust is the first Nils book. The other four, starting with Carolina Moonset, are complete standalones. Nils comes back in this book, but you don't have to know.
This is a standalone, for example.
Yeah.
Carolina Moonset is one, and then what's it? The Good Family. The Good
yeah, A
Family
Good Family.
is also is. But if you want it, but it's all helpfully listed for you in the book, so you can
Yes.
find them.
Boy, well, I mentioned Chandler. I'm a big fan. I'm a huge fan of John le Carré, who I didn't discover until the pandemic. I just find him the perfect blend of genre and literary. I love his writing so much. I'm also a big fan of Kate Atkinson, another British author. And I like Anthony Horowitz, another British author, but he wrote a lot of television, and he has a lot of like natural comedy in his book. So I feel a kinship with him, even though he has no idea who I am. Oh, I love that. The Hawthorne series.
Yeah, the metafiction thing. The new one is coming out. The American edition. May we have the British edition that he autographed for us in London? Actually, no, I don't. It's sold out. I forgot when it gets here.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
already all claimed.
So, and then, I also read out of the genre a lot. And even though she only writes a book every 10 years, I really love Donna Tartt because that's another. I mean, her books are crime fiction from page one, The Goldfinch and A Secret History, but they're literary as well. And so I'm a big fan of her work. There's a lot. I mean, William Kent Kruger, who's a fellow Minnesotan author.
He's a wonderful writer.
Such a good writer.
He's done 2 or 3 brilliant standalones, too.
Yeah, really has. Reed Farrell Coleman, who wrote a few series that I'm a big fan of his work. A lot. There's a lot out there. Jess Lowry, who's another Minnesota author.
She has he's leaning on one of her books at one point.
Yes, yeah.
Right, so Jess.
She's mentioned in that book.
It's nice
as
that you
well.
bring in so many. Anybody he mentions is worth reading. So, yeah, you
Yeah,
can take this
I'm
book.
trying to.
I thought so too. I really, yeah. So
Well, I mean, and a lot of crime fiction writers read a lot of crime fiction, so it's an
it's
inclusive.
very true. The
thing.
safe answer to your question for most often authors is to just pick on dead authors. It's very hard otherwise to, So very often when that question is asked, that's the answers you're going to get are like Raymond Chandler or Ross McDonald or whatever.
Yeah, I just read my first Ken Bruin, who just passed away recently.
He did, yeah.
I'll
tell you, the first Jack Taylor is just so.
The Guards.
Yep, that's my.
I was
my
just in
favorite
Galway
of his books.
when he
I've been
passed
there.
away.
Yeah. Oh, were you?
So I just came back, and I got that book, and I absolutely loved it. Absolutely
it's
loved
really
it.
great. I didn't like the TV series all that much.
Yeah,
that
I
they made
haven't
out of
seen
it, but The Guards is brilliant.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it really
when we
is.
were in Galway, I sort of, the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. My husband was off getting a new Harris tweed coat. Why he did it in Galway, I'll never know. So
Well, if you want
I was
wool, Ireland's
walking
the place
Ken
to get it.
Bruin. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Right. Anybody else?
Yeah. I started on Seinfeld. I worked on a lot of shows, some good, not so good. I wrote on Ellen, the sitcom, not the talk show. New Adventures of Old Christine. Not only the weirdest show I've ever worked on, but the weirdest show I've ever seen. Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. Are you? Yeah, it's super weird, isn't it? It's really weird. And
Very
it's
popular
Douglas
book here,
Adams.
though.
Like Douglas Adams wrote the book. He also wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So it's super weird. A holistic detective, like a normal detective, there's a crime and they go out and find clues. A holistic detective, weird things start happening in their life that are clues, but they have to figure out what the crime is. So at the end, you find out the crime. I know it's so weird, but it was fun. But I worked on a show called Working with Fred Savage that was on. I worked on a show called Love and War with Jay Thomas and Annie Potts. I worked on a lot of shows. Again, some were good, some not good. I worked on a lot of shows that came and went very fast. Yeah, I know we were talking about Coach earlier with Barry Kemp. We did a reboot of that show. Yeah, pardon me? It was set in Minnesota, yes. And we did a reboot where Coach was older and then his son was a coach. And we made it was one of the best things I ever worked on, but NBC didn't even air it because they didn't like one of the casting decisions. See, things like that happened in TV, which were pretty yucky. That would never happen in the book world. They wouldn't.
Yes, there's a lot of emotion, lack of logic, and generally,
and so much money is at stake. These
Right.
things cost millions of dollars per episode.
Yeah, but personalities tend to override other things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in American television, sometimes the most talented people aren't given the shot they deserve,
Yeah.
especially actors.
If you watch foreign television, we watch a lot of it. There's a channel called M for Mary, H for Harry, Z for Zebra that is absolutely brilliant. There's a new Finnish series on that is just astonishing. But anyway,
The
there's a
European, especially
fairly
their crime
small
shows.
pool
Yeah.
of actors. So if you watch the French ones, you see, you have to sort of let go of them as this one person and accept them as the new one. Exactly.
Very much so.
I was just Yeah, but that's also true in British television. It's so.
And those
Um,
British actors are so well trained. They come out of theater. Theater actors, almost without exception, are just the best. They have the chops.
yeah, but
to,
even the tiniest roles
yes,
get the perfect
exactly.
person. Sometimes there was one crime drama set in, I don't remember, Birmingham or somewhere, or no, it was further north. But anyway, I mean, they must have
Was it
dragged
Happy
some of the
Valley?
people off the street. I mean, you just could hardly believe.
Yeah,
Manchester. It was set in Manchester. You could just hardly believe these people even existed. They were in such terrible shape, and I thought, wow. I mean, I'm serious. I think
Yeah.
they may have just gone out and done a sweep to drag people in for like cameos.
they're so
Whoa,
good. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and those accents are so.
but
so
we don't
specific. Yeah.
do that here. I mean, it's a much bigger sort of industrial thing.
It is.
American television, I
Yes.
think. And then sometimes there are casting decisions. I don't know if any of you watch C.J. Box's Joe Pickett series, but I didn't think that the casting for Joe was a happy. So, despite the fact the stories are good and the landscape is gorgeous and all, if you don't really like the character,
And that's
then
tough on
it's
fans
hard.
of the books because they
Yeah,
usually the author paints a pretty decent picture and the reader has a clear image in their mind.
yeah.
So when Tom Cruise is Reacher, and Tom Cruise is a really good actor, but
He's a
he
really good
but he
actor.
can't be 6'4" and bald, like yeah.
Well, that's true, but I bragged Lee about that forever, and finally one day he was really pissed at me, and he said, he said when we sold that shoe, there were no 6 foot plus actors, big box office actors available, and he was right.
And that's
And
probably
that's why
true.
Tom Cruise got
Yeah.
the role. Now the guy they have playing Reacher now is just almost like a caricature.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish they'd just leave his shirt on. I really, he just doesn't do it for me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe
And
his next show will be
And when they
romance.
had the sex scenes, I said to Lee, "Oh my God," and he said, "Always has to be face up." And I thought, for sure, he just crush anyone. Oh Lord, I know. So that's a question of extremes, and one direction
Right.
and then the other. I do think, however, the casting of the other characters is terrific in
Yeah.
in Reacher. I do. So that's one where I watch it not for Reacher but for the supporting cast, which I think
Yeah.
are very good.
Mm-hmm.
Now the two TV series have. I think it's almost impossible to capture that level of reality and fantasy or something in a way that anybody can really. I mean, Brigadoon was all song and dance, right? So you could kind of. I love the movie, and you could kind of get along with
Right.
that, but you can't have Gamache, high
Right.
kicking his way through.
Right.
Yeah. Louise Penny, the Spectre Gamache. There have been two versions, and
One-
neither one of them has worked.
Yeah. That's right.
Three Pines is called, I think, and
Yeah. Yeah.
When you were writing TV, I assumed that you were living in California.
Yes.
You had a long career in TV writing. So somewhere there's a transition that I'm assuming that you live in Minnesota now.
I do.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about going from California and being a scriptwriter and all the Hollywood stuff to becoming a novelist in Minnesota.
an introverted novelist.
An introverted
in Minnesota.
novelist
Right.
with social skills, who gets a lot of work done in the winter. I'll tell you that much, because it's too cold to go outside. I'm from Minnesota. My family's all there, so that the going there was not difficult. And it's really, the book world is such a good fit for me that I made I'm very fortunate to have made a really smooth transition. There were no bumps for me. I did not miss being in a writer's room as much as I adore the other writers. It's just not my favorite process. And not every show has a room. Like Seinfeld didn't have a room when I was there. Larry and Jerry were together, and I was in my office, and another writer, Larry Charles, was in his office, and we would get together for lunch. And we would knock on each other's doors, but it wasn't sitting around a table together the whole time, which I really loved. But that was the last time I experienced that. I was in a room full of people the other times, so I like the book world. I like the process. When it's time for me I've been with the same editor. This is my 8th book. There are at least 2 more coming with her. And I send her a page like, this is my idea. And she says, yeah, or maybe just make sure you have this. I'm like, okay. And then I'm off writing. It's that simple.
So when you made that transition, it was manifesting this notion in your head that you wanted to be a
Yeah.
novelist, and you moved back to Minnesota. How difficult is it to find publishers? And
Well,
I'm
it,
curious about the actual
yeah,
business of what you have to do.
yes, there was some overlap. So I was working. I wrote Gone to Dust in 2015. I found an agent and forged my publisher fairly quickly, but it took almost 2 years for the book to come out, because especially with the big publishers, especially the first one, there's several sales teams and marketing people. There's one team for independent bookstores, one for Amazon, one for Barnes and Noble, one for libraries, one for audio, and so there was this big ramp up for that first book to come out. So I continued working in television. Meanwhile, Forge had ordered a second book. I was done with the second book, Broken Ice, before the first one even came out. So I had a lot of overlap. It was a lot of work. I used to get up and start working at 4 a.m. because I didn't have to be at my TV job until 10. So I would kind of do a full work day before I went to work. And I kept up that tradition for like 3 more books after I left television. And I finally am like, because this is how smart I am. Why am I getting up so early? I don't have any other job. So so there was an overlap, and so I didn't leap into the unknown. By the time I quit, I had a couple of books come out.
No.
Yeah,
Great, thank you.
yeah,
So your books are basically very, very short.
yeah.
And how did you, was that partly because you came from that TV background?
For a couple of reasons, I do tend to get to the bone pretty quickly. So my books are about 75 or 80,000 words. Pace is very important to me, but it's also the length my publisher wants. It's in the contract, like a book about 75,000 words, because they know how much it costs to print. If I come in with a 150 or 180,000 word book, that's more than they want to print and put out there. You could probably speak to that as well.
Certainly can.
Yeah.
It's the Outlander bookstore. I mean, the production, shelving them. I can tell you that one carton of 10 copies of an Outlander book weighs 32 pounds. So I'm serious, because we've had
A lot of them.
thousands of them stacked up here in the bookstore. And everybody except Diana's fans wishes that she would write smaller, because it would be.
I think most crime fiction writers prefer a book that moves pretty quickly.
There's a difference between thriller. If you've got a really big story, I'm reading Brad Taylor's book for a week from Sunday, and it's absolutely wonderful. And I always learn stuff from him. He's gone to India, and this is a whole new place for a big thriller. But his books are about 120,000 words, and thriller readers in general, expect a much more, a much bigger story. But
Yeah.
if you're writing a detective story, you don't want a lot of superfluous stuff in it. And
Yeah.
so they tend to run. Agatha Christie's books used to run about, what was it, 40 or 50?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a small size. And so somewhere between 65 and 85 is kind of normal for.
Yeah. I mean, next year I have 3 books coming out. One is a historical novel with some crime in it, but not a ton. And it's from different points of view. That's 100,000 words, that book. That's a
Okay, but
bigger-
that's historical
bigger
fiction.
Historical
and again,
fiction. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So, but I think the Nils work out well is in that shorter range.
I mean, I've had people email me and said, I read your book in one sitting. And then I'm like, now I feel bad. It took me a while to write. But or you paid full price for it and it only entertained you for 12 hours. But but that does happen. And again, one of the reasons that Forge publishes my books in hardcover and paperback at the same time, because a lot of mystery readers read 4, 5, 6 books a month, and it's expensive for them.
I'm sorry, I'm just laughing since I read that many a day.
Yeah, I know.
It's really hard. But, but no, that is true.
You're the fastest
Well,
reader
it's
I
just
know.
a fluke. But
Yeah.
but it is true that that was a model that was tried. Interestingly enough, the first decade that I had the bookstore, there was an attempt to do the hardcover paperback simultaneously, and it never worked. And then they stopped, and now all of a sudden it's become a vogue.
Yeah.
And it may be in part that publishers are competing with digital if they offer the second book cheap. Here's the whole thing.
Yes.
That writing and publishing is an attempt to marry creativity with business. And, they're antithetical in lots of ways. And once you understand that, it's a very complicated
It is.
embrace.
And the market's always changing. And
Always.
Yeah.
Right now it's all about romance and romantasy. And, after the Da Vinci Code, we got religious conspiracy thrillers practically unadulterated for 5 years. And, the Gothic came back, but now it's gone into full-fledged horror. And then everybody gets tired of it because it's the same thing too often. And then we'll see something or other. So we generally end up going back to basics.
Yeah.
It just takes a while.
Yeah.
But as a writer, you have to either write for the market or write for yourself and hope that the market will support you.
Yeah, I choose the latter because if you're chasing the market, by the time you finish a book, that trend might be over.
Mm-hmm.
So
I really feel sorry for thriller writers who are trying to write contemporary because, by the time they turn their book in, right now, the world may have, everything they've written about may have suddenly just caught up in smoke.
yeah,
And, I mean, it's easier to write something where you're not chasing reality to the degree that some of the contemporary thriller writers try to do.
yeah.
So we'll see.
That's why dragons always work.
Yeah, well, let's not go to dragons. That's my favorite topic, right? Anybody else have a question they'd like to ask?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you finish a book, like the one you just did, is the other book half written, or is it at least in your head?
I do one at a time, but by the time I get halfway through a book, I know what the next one is. So it's kind of stewing, but I don't do any work on it. But I think about it a little bit, and so when I send off a book, I sent a new one to my agent on Friday or so. I started a new one today. So, and I probably would have started it the next day, but I started this book tour. So, I do just kind of, I know what the next, I never know the story until I actually write it. But I do know the area. So I know what the next few books are. Yeah.
One last other question is, what was the path from your academic pursuit
Yeah.
to being a TV writer?
It was kind of a weird path. I was a chemistry major in college. I was planning on going to medical school. At the end of my junior year, so pretty deep into college, some friends invited me to see stand up comedy live, which I had never seen before. I'd always been a fan. When I was 13, I saved up my dollars and bought a black and white TV, 13-inch for my bedroom so I could watch Johnny Carson's monologue. But when I saw it live for the first time, for reasons that I cannot explain to this day, I thought, oh, I should do that. And like a 21-year-old boy, I just said, okay, I'll do it. I didn't really think about it much. And it went very well for me, but I really loved the writing part of it, not the performing part. And that was how it happened. Yeah.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So you could write a memoir one day and tell us about how it all worked out.
Maybe. Yeah.
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 Memoirs are another big thing at the moment, very much on the rise too. So
Yeah.
literary forms. Well, thank you all very much for your attention. Matthew, thank you so
Yeah,
much for
thank
coming
you for
to
coming,
see us.
everyone.
It's really great
Thank
to
you,
have
Barbara.
you here. If you'd like to get a book signed or talk to Matt or get a photo or whatever it is, please step up. I'm going to get him. Oh, you've got a pen. So he's all
have a
set.
pen.
He's ready to go.
Thanks.
Thank you, virtual audience.
How do I turn it off? This thing?
Just click it. It just slides
Oh.